This is my interview with Marie Alarcón, a really exciting video artist and filmmaker who also teaches digital and media arts at the University of New Mexico. Enjoy.
If you enjoy our podcast, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us bring you more content like this. You can find this episode and all of our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. See the show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading news.
All right, Marie Alarcón, thank you for joining me. Great to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, as you know, this is work in progress, so we talk about things that you're currently working on. You have a really interesting project, which is quite different for you. So why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, so I'm working on a project called Escape from Flat Earth, and it is a short narrative dramedy about three siblings, one of whom is engaged to a flat earther. And it's a proof of concept, so I'm using this as a way of breaking into narrative filmmaking as an experimental filmmaker. And it's been an interesting experience as someone who teaches film, but experimental. Being in the role of director with such a large crew is like a brand new experience for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for being on. I know it's like a scary thing for any artist to kind of expose something that's a work in progress in general. You know, it's not finished. It's not the way you want it to be seen necessarily. You're going to show us some clips. But, you know, it's even scarier maybe because you're doing something very different from what you normally do, which are quite fascinating sort of video art pieces, experimental documentary pieces, and doing something that's like a straight narrative film is really different. And what made you want to do something like this?
I've been working on a script, a feature-length script, for over 10 years, and I submitted a rough draft to the Stowe Story Lab's New Voices New Mexico Fellowship and got in, and so was able to write a feature length based on, like a full feature length based on my notes over the last bunch of years, and I really want to direct it. I imagine it to be much more magical, realism, fantastical. The main character, rather than living in a trailer, is supposed to live in this giant rambling treehouse, and looking at sort of the relationship to cults that this particular family has. So there's what the short film touches on is just the very like basics of what I ultimately want to do. But when I first started thinking about becoming a filmmaker when I was like 18 years old, I realized the power that narrative had, and I ended up in the documentary world, and I ended up wanting to do that. But there's always been a part of me that's wanted to make a narrative and just haven't had the story until now. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the trailer. We'll probably show the opening sequence here where we see the trailer. It's beautifully shot.
Thanks.
I mean, that's something I think that does carry over from your other work is you know how to compose a shot really well. And it's nice because it's, I mean, I know it's going to be a different, big sprawling treehouse in the, when it becomes a feature, but it's kind of nice here. I think that when I think about other films I've seen that take place in trailer parks, like John Waters' Pink Flamingos, or what was that film with Matthew McConaughey with the chicken wing or I don't know. Anyway, but it's often like there's a kind of like, I feel like a kind of classism maybe in the way that it's shot. And it's almost like you're sort of, I like making fun of people for being poor or something. And this is so not that way. There's a real dignity to it and a beauty. And was that something that was important to you to show?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I grew up a lot of places, but when I was young, I lived in rural Arizona, and my parents' first house was a trailer on land that they had bought. And so for me, the idea of a trailer as a trailer park is, yes, people live in trailer parks, but this is about someone who's really made a choice to live in a space that is cost effective,
Yeah.
and they care about their space. And all of the characters, I wanted it to be relatively clear that they're not wealthy, that they're not coming from a lot of money. These are orphans, really.
Yeah, but I guess because there is that aspect of it that's rooted in your own experience, you're able to bring something, I think, that feels authentic because it is authentic.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. So the one character announces that they're getting married. And usually when we have a family member or friend who announces getting married, it's like, oh, congratulations. And that's not the reaction. It's kind of like, are you sure about that? Right. And that's an interesting dynamic, I think, to explore.
Yeah. I mean, I think so much of this, the script that I was working on for the last 10 years and now this short, I mean, it's all based on familial experiences. And so me and my siblings, although not orphans, did have to sort of raise ourselves in a lot of ways. And we're really funny towards each other because even though family is really important to us and we've stayed closer than a lot of my friends' siblings, we have this sort of attitude towards family that's also sort of like take it or leave it. So we're really honest with each other. We're sort of not the kind of people to fake emotions.
Yeah.
And so I wanted that to be sort of heightened within the film.
It reminds me a little bit of Miranda July, actually, who's another person who came from the video art world and then started doing feature films. And I remember she said one time she felt like what makes her characters different from, I don't know, just people in reality is that they're just slightly more honest.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it seems like, I mean, you kind of have that with your own family, and that kind of comes through, I think, in these characters too. Although there's a lot that's unspoken as well. There's a lot of silent moments and a kind of you can sense the judgments that are happening or the what's not being said.
Right. Well, I'm glad that that's coming through because it's really hard to know how to write dialogue well in a way that leaves room for showing and not just exposition all the time.
Yeah. What was the biggest challenge, like coming from a totally different way of working? Well, you mentioned that you're working with more people, a bigger crew and a cast, and so maybe that's it, or but there must be a lot of differences between the kind of work that you're doing previously, the more experimental stuff. I guess it was just normally you with a camera.
Yeah, it's been solo work for the most part. I've had assistants from time to time, but even then I've insisted on doing everything myself, even when I've had some crew. This is the first time that I really had to let go, and I felt good about letting go. I definitely didn't feel like I had control issues, which I was worried about. The reputation of directors in the culture of directing and filmmaking is pretty bad. There's like a short documentary about like why are directors assholes, and do you have to be an asshole? It's like a real question. So it was an interesting process letting go, but also working with actors. I felt like I wish that I had had more skill working with actors moving into it, but there's only one way of really doing that, and that's working with actors. But they were all so gracious and generous in allowing me to sort of fumble through my direction in terms of what I needed from them as actors. Yeah. And I trusted them a lot.
Yeah. Now the title, Escape from Flat Earth, sounds like it might be sci-fi, and you did hint that maybe in the expanded sort of feature-length version of this, it could move a little bit into that direction?
Into the magical magical realism for sure. Maybe not so much sci-fi, but there's still so much room for writing in this piece. I think of something like Sorry to Bother You, which sort of goes off the deep end towards the end.
Sure.
And, you know, I think that those kinds of films are inspiring for sure. Or even something like Atlanta, which has like, it's not sci-fi. It's not quite magical realism. But it shows the absurdity of the world in a way that pure realism couldn't.
Yeah, and I feel like what you've done here is you've really set up a quite, like it's really the language of realism, you know, that you're working in. And so I think it's like if you start to insert elements that are a little bit outside of that, it could be really interesting because you've grounded us in something that feels real.
Sure.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how you where you take that. But for this, so I've seen, I guess it's like 8 minutes, and you have a couple more scenes you're going to put in for this short film. How long do you think this is going to be?
It's going to be 10 minutes, 10 11 minutes, yeah.
And you're trying to finish this up to get it submitted for some festivals?
Yes, I'm trying to get it out to a festival on April 1st.
Okay.
So I'm talking to the editor now about getting a rough draft that has all of the placeholders so that I can submit it as a draft.
Yeah. Do you work well with the pressure of deadlines?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think deadlines are what are necessary for me to like really create work. I do a lot of my work based on artist residencies and sort of grant proposals.
Yeah.
So there's a built-in time period that things have to get done in, and that's really helpful for someone like me.
Yeah. Let's talk about the role of religion in this film. It seems pretty prominent. And did you grow up religious?
I did. I grew up Jehovah's Witness. Yeah. And my parents were missionaries with the Jehovah's Witness religion, and that's why we lived in rural Arizona.
Are the characters, are they any of them Jehovah's Witness?
They're
it wasn't really
it
clear.
Doesn't, yeah, we don't go into it. I'm still working out the details of the cult that their parents were in, but in the feature length, their parents pass away in a car accident that they think might be related to the cult. So yeah. But I mean, I am basing it on sort of the enclosed society of so many religions that, like, similar to Mormonism, but more extreme in terms of like isolation.
Yeah.
The Jehovah's Witnesses are very just insular.
You're not Jehovah's Witness now, but your family is?
My mom still is, yeah.
Is it difficult to, I mean, has that...
Yeah, it was difficult for a really long time, and I think at this point, she's made peace. She's made peace with it. Yeah.
Because sometimes I've heard that, like, in the Jehovah's Witness religion, like, they encourage people to kind of shun
completely
children or family members that opt out of it.
Yeah, I left home at 16 because I no longer wanted to participate, and that was the only way out. Yeah.
And then I guess that was your foray into becoming an artist?
Yeah, I mean, my father considers himself an artist. He's unpublished, but he writes poetry and novels and music and draws and does all the things. So it never occurred to me that I had to be famous in order to call myself an artist.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was that like in the beginning at 16, leaving home? And yeah, it's difficult to just make a living and you know.
Yeah, I stayed with friends. I stayed with friends' families until my parents came to terms with the fact that if they wanted me in their life, that they would have to chill out. And so I lived with friends and family for a year, and then moved back home, and then moved out permanently moved to New York City for a while. And really, I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, but I didn't really know how to become a filmmaker. And so I eventually got a position first as a secretary, then eventually as a production manager for a small nonprofit documentary production company.
Did you know what video art was when you were growing up?
No idea. I did not go to museums. I went to my first museum when I was like 21.
In New York?
In Spain, oddly.
Uh-huh.
I didn't go to a lot of museums when I lived in New York just because I was so broke and had so little time. I was working multiple jobs, and it was not a space where I didn't even know that contemporary art could be interesting, let alone classical art. When I was in Spain, seeing Goya's in person for the first time, seeing what is his name? Well, anyway, just seeing like the way that paintings can be alive in person, the presence of a piece of art was new for me. I knew that I liked to draw, and I knew that I liked to make things that looked pretty, but I didn't realize what was possible within fine art really until I got into undergraduate. I went to school when I was like 25, and was learning documentary production, and that's where the video art came in.
Where was that?
That was at Evergreen in Olympia, Washington.
So you moved around a little
A
bit.
lot.
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I mean, so you saw Goya in Spain. You realized like art doesn't have to be pretty, I guess, because he did all the war stuff, and
Yeah.
It's, and then you end up in Washington, and you're exposed to video art. That must have been exciting for you.
Yeah, it was incredible. I really took off with that, and I think that I just never looked back. Once I made a piece in school, and everyone's like, "Oh, you must love Maya Deren," and I was like, "I have no idea who that is,"
Right.
and then realized that there was like an affinity that I was already sort of making work within a sort of surrealist framework.
Yeah.
And it made sense. I was already into poetry, so the poetics sort of moved into my filmmaking. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just talk a little bit about some of the work that you did before the current project, and the one I keep forgetting that the Good Heart. The Good Heart. Tell us about that piece.
Yeah, I was in a residency in Good Heart, Michigan, and that was an incredible experience. It was for 2 weeks. I had my own space there, and I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I was just coming out of my chemo and radiation, and so I was still in recovery from all of that. So in those 2 weeks, I spent a lot of time resting, but I also spent a lot of time exploring the nature around, and wanted to make something that felt connected to the space, that like was an answer to sort of what I considered a potential invasion of a space. I'm someone who is part of a hugely diasporic family. So no one has married within their own race or culture in generations. And so I'm always interested in the ways that I can connect as a diasporic being to a space, while also like acknowledging that I am also part of a settler colonial project.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting piece, and there's kind of and we'll show an image, I'm sure, but there's a figure. I guess it is you, right?
Sure.
But it's kind of
yeah.
in silhouette and in I don't know what's it called, the technique that you use is sort of but it's sort of like a video within a video.
Yeah, I used a 3D model.
And then the voiceover is very personal and discussing identity and how complex that is and everything. But it's this sort of AI generated voice, like text to voice application, which is so denatured and so impersonal, and it's such a contrast between what it's saying and how it sounds.
Right.
And why did you want to do that? I mean, I think it's really effective,
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of things going on for me. One was that I was playing with the idea of this avatar that could live in the world and do the things that I couldn't do. So thinking about using this digital avatar in real world spaces. So I have it moving, dancing, running, things that I couldn't really do at that moment. It was like enough that I just like put the camera down in a space. And so I felt like that sort of digital persona wasn't just a stand-in, but its own being, and in being its own being needed its own voice. I don't know if that's a satisfying answer, but
Well, it's interesting. And now that you're working with actors, I mean, do you see them in any way as kind of avatars of you as well?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I try to make sure that I'm not writing characters as one-to-ones with people in the real world, but there's so much influence from my life experience and from my familial experience. And so, so my brother was the cinematographer on this piece. And one of the characters wears these red Dickies that my brother wore for like a decade. And he was like, they're the wrong color. But he knew what they were referencing. And I feel like there are these ways in which I want them to live on their own and be their own characters, be their own personalities, but they're so heavily influenced for sure.
How do you know when a piece like this is finished?
Timeline, deadlines.
Like, all right, we got to submit it. That's the final cut. That's it.
Kind of. You kind of have to at some point, because you could infinitely change films and projects. Nothing is ever really done, is the way that I think about it.
Yeah, I heard a writer, I forget who, say, there gets to be a point when you're, changing and doing new drafts that you're not making it better, you're just making it different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You can have multiple versions of a project and have them be sort of separate entities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like, this is almost finished, so I think you're going to be all right with the deadline, and then it'll be exciting to see what you turn it into for the feature. You're going to continue doing your more experimental video art stuff as well?
Absolutely. I'm working on a VR piece right now.
Oh, that sounds exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, well, maybe we can talk about that sometime in the future.
Awesome.
But thanks so much for being here. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, same. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.